Hey guys, tonight we drift straight into the cool dusk of a world where your shoes crunch over damp soil, your breath fogs in the air, and the only glow ahead comes from a wobbling little flame trapped inside a hollow turnip. You don't know who carved it, maybe a farmer, maybe a child, but it flickers like a sleepy star trying its best to stay awake. As you move closer, its crooked grin stretches across the pale root flesh, and the dim light catches on drifting smoke from peat fires nearby. For a second you think, wow, this is cozy, and then, because reality should always keep you humble, you realize that if you actually lived in this 5th century village, you probably wouldn't survive the winter unless you knew how to dry your socks over a fire without setting them ablaze. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I'd also love it if you comment with where you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The air cools as you follow a narrow footpath down into a cluster of homes so small and uneven they look like they're slowly exhaling into the mist. Your pace settles into that bedtime rhythm where every step feels like it stretches a little longer, softening your thoughts. Peat smoke floats in slow ribbons between the thatched roofs, and you feel the faint prickle of autumn on your skin, the same autumn that, centuries ago, marked Samhain, the Celtic turning of the year. Historians still argue whether Samhain was considered the new year by all Celtic groups, but what they agree on is that this transitional night held a kind of hush, like the world was sliding between two breaths. And in that space between breaths, villagers believed the boundaries softened. Spirits wandered, lost souls slipped through gaps, and the living protected themselves with, well, whatever they had. And what they had were turnips. Lots of them. A mainstream historical fact slips gently into your night. Long before pumpkins strutted onto the scene, Celtic communities carved lanterns out of turnips or other root vegetables, their pale interiors scraped clean with small knives or spoons. These lanterns weren't for making things pretty. They were for warding things off, especially the mischievous, confusing, occasionally drama-filled spirits who supposedly roamed across the land at summer's end. You reach a small open space in the village where people are bustling, or at least as much as you can bustle when your shoes are probably made of stitched-together scraps and your to-do list includes "don't freeze." Women carry baskets of newly pulled turnips, their fingers muddy, nails short from a lifetime of tending fields. Children dart between legs, clutching small roots they're desperate to carve, even though adults keep reminding them not to stab themselves. A few older men squat by a low table, comparing the relative ugliness of the faces they carved earlier, because apparently trash-talking is a timeless human tradition. You glance toward the center fire, a pit ringed with stones, glowing low and red. Someone has placed a carved turnip beside it, its face intentionally grotesque, maybe inspirationally so. The eyes are triangular but jagged, as if the knife slipped or the carver sneezed. The mouth curves too wide, giving it a kind of goofy menace. You can almost hear a villager saying, "It's supposed to look like that, because some things also never change." As you breathe in the earthy scent, a whisper of a quirky tidbit threads through the night. In some parts of Ireland and Scotland, the lanterns weren't just protective, they were also used to represent or mock spirits, sometimes carried door to door in early versions of those roaming seasonal traditions. Historians still argue whether these practices directly inspired later Halloween customs, but the echoes feel familiar. You wander closer to one of the cottages, careful not to trip over the uneven ground. A woman stands hunched over a table, her sleeves rolled to her elbows. She's twisting a small knife into the top of a turnip, carving a neat circle to remove the cap. You watch the tension in her shoulders release as she pries it open, scooping out the dense, earthy-smelling interior. The sound is soft, like a muted crunch, and it somehow pairs perfectly with your own slow breathing. Behind her, a man ties bundles of reeds that will serve as makeshift handles. They're practical, scratchy, and slightly lopsided, much like every DIY project humanity has ever attempted. He mutters something under his breath about a lantern he carved last year that fell apart halfway to the festival grounds, and even though he's centuries away from you, the energy is very IKEA furniture broke again. The night deepens around you, but you're warmed by the glow of several new lanterns now perched on stumps and ledges. Their combined light feels like it's gently pushing back at the darkness, not aggressively, but in that slightly annoyed way cats push against closed doors. A child sidles up to you, holding a turnip bigger than his head. You hear the soft, earnest tone as he tells you he wants his lantern to scare away the thin ones, spirits whispered about by older villagers. Whether those spirits were metaphors for winter hardships or imagined beings is something historians still debate, but the stories lived vividly in young minds. The child pokes the turnip with a stick, realizing about 3 seconds too late that turnips are, in fact, rock hard. You watch him process the betrayal and decide, with the seriousness of a tiny philosopher, that maybe he should ask his mother to do it. Nearby, 2 older women discuss the season's harvest. One mentions how a colder than usual summer left them with smaller crops. That's your cue for a grounding historical fact. Across northern Europe, the climate patterns of earlier centuries often made root vegetables essential. They grew reliably, stored well, and survived the soar of weather that would make delicate plants give up and spiritually ascend. Villagers carved what they had, turnips, beets, sometimes even potatoes, not because they were aesthetically pleasing, but because survival is basically just picking whichever vegetable looks least likely to betray you. You inhale again, imagining the weight of the chilly air filling your chest. It smells of earth, damp wool, and the hint of smoke that clings to everything. Your thoughts begin to drift the way they do right before sleep, soft edges, slow curls, no sharp corners. Yet the story continues to unfold in front of you, steady and unbroken. A group of villagers gather at the edge of the fields. They light their lanterns and hold them out, forming a shaky line of flickering faces that look like eerie little spectators. One of the men taps a stick against a stone to get everyone's attention, and for a moment you feel like you're watching an ancient version of a neighborhood watch meeting, except with more dirt roads and fewer passive-aggressive Facebook posts. He speaks quietly, reminding everyone to keep their lanterns lit through the night, not because something dramatic will happen if they don't, but because traditions settle the mind. Rituals offer structure when life feels unpredictable. And honestly, when winter is about to close in, you take whatever comfort you can get, even if it comes in the shape of a root vegetable with an arguably ridiculous face. You walk with the villagers as they line the path with lanterns, the lights forming a trail like a string of sleepy constellations on the ground. Some lanterns flicker weakly, some shine stubbornly bright, and one just sputters like it's having an existential crisis. Its owner sighs deeply but keeps walking, which feels extremely relatable. A woman nearby hums a folk tune. It's simple, 5 notes repeating, but it settles into your bones, a soft rhythm that feels like someone gently tapping you on the shoulder every few seconds saying, "Relax, it's fine." You feel the sway of her voice, the crackling fire behind you, the cold pressing against your cheeks. Everything slows. Your mind drifts into a moment that blends time, the villagers of centuries past and you, standing in the middle of their preparations, both holding the same quiet hope that the night passes safely. You feel a gentle ache in your chest, not unpleasant, just a reminder of how human it is to want protection, comfort, connection. And as you let that feeling settle, this seems like a good moment, soft, emotional, sincere, to slide in your 2 to 3 minute mark encouragement. In a low, calming voice, you remind viewers, gently, kindly, that if they feel connected to this little nighttime journey, it truly helps to like the video, subscribe, and leave a comment about what part of the story made them feel cozy or nostalgic. Not in a pushy way, but like someone whispering, "Hey, if you want to stay for more nights like this, you can." You leave the villagers behind as they continue their quiet rituals, and the path ahead stretches into the gentle dark. The carved turnip light beside you flickers once, twice, like it's winking. You follow it deeper into the story. You follow the faint ribbon of lantern light away from the cluster of cottages, and the path takes you toward a workshop-like space, though workshop is a generous word for a leaning shed made of timber, peat blocks, and the collective hope that it won't collapse in the next windstorm. Still, this is where villagers sharpen tools, slice vegetables, mend harnesses, and occasionally hide from their responsibilities under the guise of checking on the knives. Inside, the air is thick with the smell of cut root vegetables, smoke, and that earthy tang that clings to old wooden walls. You step over a pile of dried reeds and approach a long table where 2 villagers sit, their elbows planted firmly beside a growing stack of peeled turnip skins. You can hear the rhythmic scrape of knives hollowing each root like a gentle steady heartbeat of the night. One man, broad shoulders, beard that clearly retired from being brushed, leans into his work with serious concentration. He uses a simple iron blade, curved just slightly, perfect for gouging out stubborn pieces of turnip flesh. Another carver nearby wields something more delicate, a bone-handled tool shaped almost like a tiny scoop. It's the medieval equivalent of a melon baller, except bulkier, duller, and liable to bend if you look at it funny. A mainstream historical fact threads through the scene as you watch the tools move. In early rural communities across Ireland and Scotland, iron blades were valuable, often passed down through families or shared between neighbors. Many households also kept small, multi-purpose knives used for everything from preparing food to carving lanterns. And because iron was expensive, people took very good care of their tools. You see one woman polishing her blade with a bit of oil-soaked cloth, the motion slow and circular, like a ritual all its own. The room glows with lanterns already completed and set aside, their carved faces hunched into the dim corners like tiny sentinels. Each one is unique, one grins with too many teeth, one scowls like a disappointed goat, one just looks confused by the meaning of life. You feel oddly comforted by that one. A quirky tidbit drifts in. Some records suggest that in certain villages, children believed the best way to make a lantern shine brighter was to whisper a warming rhyme into it before lighting. Whether the rhyme was magical or simply adorable is unclear, but you imagine a toddler earnestly chanting at a turnip like it's about to take midterms. Historians still argue whether these rhymes were rooted in earlier protective charms or were simply the result of bored children inventing traditions on the spot, something kids are exceptional at. You settle onto a low wooden bench and pick up a small, already clean turnip. It fits in your hands like a cool stone, dense and slightly damp. A villager hands you a small blade, carefully, with the gentle suspicion reserved for anyone new to sharp objects. With a steady touch, you carve 2 uneven eyes. They're lopsided, but charmingly so. You feel the satisfying resistance of the root under your fingers. The man beside you nods approvingly, though it's the kind of nod one gives when encouraging a child who's done something marginally competent. "Not bad," he says, voice gravelly, for someone whose cloak looks too clean. You resist the urge to explain that you're technically from the future and your cloak is a hoodie. Probably better to keep things simple tonight. He shows you how to thin the walls from the inside by scraping in circular motions. You follow his lead, feeling the texture shift from firm to tender. The turnip becomes lighter, hollowed, almost delicate. When he taps the side, it gives off a soft wooden thwack, the sign of proper carving. But your wrist aches a little. Turnips are stubborn creatures. Pumpkins? Soft, compliant, easy. Turnips? They're like the bouncers of the vegetable kingdom, dense, unyielding, and absolutely not impressed by your efforts. The woman across from you chuckles, seeing your struggle. "Don't worry," she says. "Everyone's first one looks like it got startled by a goose." You glance at the face you've carved and, yeah, that seems accurate. The villagers talk as they carve. Stories drift through the air like smoke. A man recounts how last year, someone carved a lantern so frightening that 2 goats refused to walk past it for a week. A woman shares how her grandmother used to carve turnips with tiny spiral patterns instead of faces because she believed the spirits disliked tidy shapes. Historians still debate whether these spiral designs had symbolic meaning or were merely an expression of creative boredom. Someone hands you a bundle of dried fiber, twisted plant material that will serve as a wick. You watch as they dip several of these cords into tallow, letting them soak before laying them out to cool. Tallow candles were common in these communities, made from rendered animal fat, and while they weren't exactly fragrant, unless cow-scented counts as a fragrance, they were practical and reliable. A tiny historical detail slides in. Beeswax candles existed but were expensive, more often used in religious spaces or by wealthier households. For villagers, tallow was the go-to fuel for lanterns and small lights. You hold your wick between 2 fingers, feeling the slight tackiness of the cooled fat. A villager shows you how to position it inside the turnip using a small bed of ash or a pinch of earth. When lit, the flame will look tiny, shy, but strong enough to make your carved face glow from within. You step outside with them to test your lantern. The air hits your skin like a cold whisper, crisp and edged with the scent of distant fields. The night opens above you, dark but soft, as though the sky itself is settling into sleep. The man with the beard lights your wick using a coal from the fire. As the flame catches, the turnip glows faintly orange from the inside, its features coming alive. Even your lopsided eyes look charming in the flicker. You smile. The man grunts approval. This is probably as enthusiastic as he gets. A pair of children rush over, proudly showing off their lanterns. One has carved a face that appears to be mid-sneeze. The other looks like it's holding a deep grudge against someone. Kids are geniuses at accidental emotional expression apparently. The crowd laughs as a woman emerges from the shed with a lantern carved into the shape of a tiny boar. It's surprisingly detailed. Everyone gathers around to admire it. The woman shrugs modestly but clearly enjoys the admiring murmurs. You realize that carving lanterns is both practical and a way for creativity to sneak into daily life, like art class, but with more mud. Someone nearby begins sharpening another blade on a whetstone. The sound is soothing, long, soft strokes, the repetition drawing your mind into that half-dreamy state. The scrape of metal becomes a rhythm against the low hum of villagers speaking. It feels like you're inside an ancient lullaby. Your eyelids grow heavy as you watch someone thread a thin strip of leather through a carved handle, creating a makeshift strap. They hold their lantern up, admiring how it swings gently, glowing like a captured firefly. The soft sway mirrors the slow pendulum of your thoughts. You step a bit farther from the shed, feeling the cold damp earth press through your shoes. You watch villagers carrying their finished lanterns down the path, their steps illuminated in tiny pulses of warm light. The lanterns bob like sleepy stars drifting in a stream. Two men argue, lightly, over which tool makes a better carving edge. One swears by a curved blade, insisting it's perfect for scooping. The other claims a straight blade allows more precision. Historians still argue whether specialized carving tools existed widely during the early centuries, or whether people simply made do with what they had. You suspect both men are correct and also that they just enjoy arguing. A basket of rejected turnip scraps sits near the entrance. The air around it smells of raw earth and faint sweetness. A dog sniffs the pieces hopefully. The dog is, unfortunately, disappointed. You wander back toward the fire pit, guided by the warmth more than the light. A few villagers sit around it, comparing the shapes and details of their finished lanterns. Someone jokes that a certain lantern looks like it's judging everyone. Someone else says that's exactly why they carved it, it's meant to scare off trouble. One woman sharpens the tip of her knife absent-mindedly and tells you how her mother taught her to carve lanterns. "Steady hands, patient breath," she says. "Don't rush the corners." You think, for a moment, that this advice applies to more in life than turnips. Maybe everything. Maybe even the way you move through your days, soft corners, patient breath. You sit beside her, watching the fire throw long shadows onto the earth. Behind those shadows, faint shapes of lanterns flicker like small guardians. This feels like the perfect moment again, soft, relaxed, to remind viewers, gently, that if they're enjoying drifting through this world with you, liking the video and subscribing helps the channel a lot. Even just commenting something simple like "still awake" or "listening from ____ keeps the story alive. You add that invitation the same way one might offer someone a warm blanket, no pressure, just comfort. The woman beside you lifts her lantern and places it near the fire, letting the light blend with the flames. You watch as the glow grows stronger, overlapping, merging old traditions, old tools, and soft moments all weaving together. You rise, lantern in hand, and follow the villagers as they begin taking their creations out into the dark fields, ready to place them where protection feels needed most. And as you step forward, the weight of the lantern in your hands feels steady, warm, and ancient. The night calls you deeper still. You follow the faint procession of lanterns as they drift into the cooling night air, each one bobbing like a tiny orange heartbeat against the darkness. The villagers spread out along a narrow path leading toward a low hill, their steps slow, deliberate, almost ritualistic. You sense something shifting, not frightening, not dramatic, just the quiet awareness that you're approaching the part of the night where stories begin to thicken. The breeze carries the smell of wet grass and the faint sweetness of crushed turnip. A woman steps beside you, her lantern carved into a face that looks perpetually unimpressed. She gestures for you to follow, and as you walk, she tells you in a low voice that this is the hour for stories, not the kind you tell loudly, not the kind that make children giggle, but the ones whispered because they feel older than words. A few villagers settle near the slope of the hill, forming a loose circle. You sit with them, your legs brushing cool earth. The lanterns cast strange angles of light across their faces, making expressions leap and change with every flicker. Someone clears their throat, and just like that, the gentle hum of the night leans towards storytelling mode. You know immediately where this is going. You can feel it in the way they shift their weight, the way they glance toward the carved lanterns, the way the older folks exchange a knowing nod. This is Jack's hour. Stingy Jack. The spirit whose story is woven into the roots of these lantern traditions, the same way tallow is worked into wicks. A man begins with a tone so casual it almost feels comical, because nothing says sleepy bedtime vibe like an ancient tale of supernatural mischief. Jack, he says, was a fellow who could talk himself out of anything. You lean back, the earth cool beneath your palms, listening as he continues. Jack was clever, the kind of clever that makes people suspicious. He was good with words, slippery with promises, and never paid for his own drink. A mainstream historical fact slips quietly into your mind. Many scholars believe the stingy Jack story circulated across Ireland long before Christian influences blended with local folklore, though historians still argue whether the earliest versions involved the devil at all, or simply a wandering trickster's spirit. But in tonight's telling, the version you hear includes the devil, a tavern, and a trick that would make even the most dramatic modern con artist applaud. The villagers tell you how Jack invited the devil for a drink, an ambitious flex, even by mischievous standards. When the bill arrived, Jack refused to pay, convincing the devil to shapeshift into a coin to cover it. Then, in a move so petty it deserves applause, Jack pocketed the coin next to a small cross, trapping the devil until he agreed not to take Jack's soul for several years. You picture it, Jack swaggering out of the tavern, jingling his devil coin like someone proud of scoring a free trial subscription. Your sleepy brain thinks, bold move, Jack. Questionable long-term planning, but bold. When years passed and the devil returned, Jack tricked him again, this time by climbing an apple tree and carving a quick little cross into the trunk. The devil, stuck again, bargained with him, no claiming Jack's soul even after death. And so, when Jack finally died, heaven refused him because of his lifetime of trickery, hell refused him because of the deal. He was forced to wander the dark roads of the world, carrying only a glowing ember placed inside a hollow turnip to light his way. A soft chill moves across your arms, not fear, but that dreamy awareness that old stories have a way of slipping under your skin. A quirky tidbit glimmers next. In some regional traditions, Jack's lantern wasn't just a warning, it was used to explain strange lights seen over bogs or marshes, sometimes called will-o'-the-wisps. Children were told not to follow those lights, because they belonged to wandering souls like Jack who might lead them astray. Historians still argue whether these explanations were metaphorical cautionary tales or genuine belief systems rooted in natural phenomena. Around you, the villagers murmur the name Jack o' the-Lantern, their voices blending with the wind. It sounds old, worn smooth by centuries, yet it hums with a kind of comfort, like a bedtime story meant to teach as much as entertain. You look at the lantern you carved earlier. The way its small flame pushes against the carved features suddenly feels symbolic. The turnip isn't just a random vegetable hacked into a face. It's a continuation of a story older than the village, older than the hill, older than the cold air settling around your shoulders. One of the older women begins a variation of the story, this one darker, but still wrapped in that gentle, sleepy cadence. In her version, Jack didn't trick the devil, he simply tried to cheat death, and failed spectacularly. When death found him wandering after life, he gave Jack a single coal to light his way, stuffed into the nearest object, which happened to be a turnip Jack had stolen earlier. You smirk. Classic Jack. Stealing vegetables and accidentally inventing seasonal decor. Another villager adds that in his grandfather's story, Jack was neither hero nor villain, just a lonely figure wandering forever, a reminder to live honestly. Historians still argue whether these versions emerged separately or branched from one original tale, but what matters here is how each family shaped Jack to reflect their own values, and perhaps their own fears. A lantern flickers beside you, light swirling like a heartbeat. Someone nudges it closer to the center, letting its glow define the storytelling circle. You sink deeper into the cool earth, letting the stories wash over you. The night thickens. Your eyelids grow heavier. The villagers begin comparing their own experiences with mysterious night lights, faint glows near bogs, odd moving sparks in fields, the occasional mischievous flicker that made an animal startle. Some of these events likely had logical explanations: gas igniting over marshes, reflections, fireflies. Others, maybe just imagination carried by the wind. But to these villagers, the world is richly layered, visible and invisible intertwined like threads and cloth. A soft debate breaks out between two older men. One insists that Jack's story originated from actual sightings of wandering lights, while the other argues it was crafted to teach children not to wander alone at night. Historians would probably smile at this, since scholars still argue whether folklore emerged from natural events or cultural teaching needs. Here, under the starlit sky, the debate feels timeless. Your lantern's shadow stretches long across the grass, bending with the breeze. It looks like it's reaching, maybe searching, just like Jack, still wandering through stories long after his hypothetical turnip cooled. Someone begins plucking at a small harp, ancient, simple, missing a string. The warm notes drift over the circle like little puffs of breath. The melody repeats, soft and circular, forming a cradle for the storyteller's voice. You notice the children inching closer to their parents. Not afraid, just leaning in, drawn by the mystery. You feel that tug too. As wild as the tales may be, they offer a sense of connection, like the communal version of telling scary stories with flashlights but with the added charm of smoky lanterns and hand-carved faces. A man behind you mutters that when he was young, his grandfather made him leave a lantern outside every year so Jack wouldn't knock on the door seeking warmth. You picture Jack, chilly, root lantern in hand, hoping someone might offer him a place to rest. It's oddly sympathetic. A little sad. But comforting in the way folklore often is, teaching you how to face fear through understanding, through story, through ritual. This seems like a perfect moment to slide in your gentle encouragement again. In a whispery tone, you remind your viewer that if these old stories make their mind sink deeper into softness, if they're enjoying drifting through this slow walk into ancient folklore, they can like the video, subscribe for more nights like this, and comment their favorite version of the Jack-o'-lantern legend. You frame it not as an obligation, but as a shared lantern passed between storyteller and listener. You feel the night cooling further, the first hints of dew sparkling faintly in lantern light. The villagers around you stretch, yawn, rub tired eyes. Their voices quiet. The circle widens slightly, breaths sinking in that natural rhythm groups fall into when the energy dips. One last lantern is placed at the top of the hill, a larger one, carved with careful patterns that catch the firelight like etched runes. It's meant to represent Jack's wandering path, a guiding point rather than a warning. You walk up to it, feeling the grass bend beneath your feet. When you reach the lantern, you can see the village behind you, tiny dots of flickering flame marking paths, doorways, and gathering spots. Each light a story. Each root-carved face a memory. Each lantern a small defiance of darkness, not dramatic, not heroic, just peaceful, steady, human. You stand there, breathing in the cold night, letting your mind drift on the edge of dreaming. And as you do, you feel the soft tug of continuity, the sense that Jack's lantern, your lantern, the villagers' lanterns are all part of one long thread stretching across centuries, winding its way into your hands tonight. The wind carries a faint whisper. Could be a story. Could be your imagination. Could be Jack. But the night remains gentle, cradling every possibility. And so you follow the villagers as they begin their slow descent back toward the cottages, letting the story settle like warm embers in your chest. You drift down the gentle slope with the villagers, your steps slow, cushioned by the damp grass. The stories of Jack still ripple through your mind, but now the energy shifts, softens, widens, becomes something more communal. The hill opens out toward the heart of the village where people are gathering for the evening rites, their lanterns glowing like a constellation that decided to settle on Earth for a night. As you approach, the night air thickens with wood smoke and the faint scent of brewing herbs. A large central fire burns in the open clearing, not roaring, just simmering steady, bright enough to be comforting, calm enough to be hypnotic. Sparks drift upward like tiny fire spirits, lazily floating before disappearing into the dark. You feel immediately wrapped in that subtle warmth that gatherings like this always create, where everyone's breath mingles, where shared tasks settle the nerves, where the whole community moves like one sleepy organism. A group of children rush past you, laughing as they hold their lanterns high. One of them nearly collides with a stack of peat blocks, and an elder gives the kind of stern, tired look universal to all adults who've ever watched kids run near something flammable. The kid adjusts his pace to slightly less chaotic and scurries off. At the center of the clearing, villagers begin setting up for the evening's customs, small games, offerings, music, and the quiet rituals tied to Samhain. Historians still argue whether these practices were strictly religious, loosely spiritual, or simply seasonal habits woven into rural life. But as you stand here, the distinction feels unimportant. Everything blends, the practical, the symbolic, the playful. You watch as people place their turnip lanterns in a wide circle around the fire pit. The flickering faces form a protective ring, a border of light between the cozy human cluster and the unknown beyond. The glow is warm but uneven, giving the impression that the lanterns themselves are shifting like drowsy guards trying their best. A woman hands you a small wooden bowl filled with roasted grains. "For good fortune," she murmurs. You take a handful, feeling their warmth seep into your palms before eating them. Nutty, simple, satisfying. She explains, in that calm way villagers speak during long nights, that sharing grains after the harvest helps bind the community. A mainstream historical fact surfaces gently. Many Celtic and Northern European communities believed that sharing the final grains of the harvest protected against scarcity in winter. Not magic, just the practical wisdom of pooling resources and strengthening trust. Nearby, a man places a small bundle of dried herbs into the fire. A sweet, earthy aroma rises, swelling into the air. Someone tells you it's mugwort mixed with a touch of juniper, used in some areas during Samhain to cleanse the space or ward off illness. Historians still argue whether herbal smoke had symbolic meaning or was simply nature's version of hand sanitizer. The scent drifts around you, curling under your nose, warm and soothing. It smells like old forests, like the memory of rain, like something your ancestors might have breathed without thinking. A young girl approaches carrying a bundle of cloth. She opens it to reveal tiny carved figurines, animals, mostly. A cow, a hare, a crow, a boar. They're crude but charming, like the ancient version of collectible figurines. She places them carefully around the fire in a semicircle. Her mother nods proudly. You lean down to look at them. The crow is especially interesting. Its proportions are slightly off, giving it a mischievous posture. The girl grins and whispers that she carved it herself. A quirky tidbit surfaces in your mind. In some folk traditions, people left symbolic figures to honor animals associated with different seasons or spiritual paths. But just as often, children carved whatever animal they liked best. Historians still debate whether these figures reflect ritual significance or simply the universal childhood instinct to whittle anything small and adorable. You settle beside the fire as villagers prepare the games, simple, slow-paced, perfect for a night where the goal is not excitement, but togetherness. A woman fills a shallow wooden trough with water and sets small apple slices afloat. You watch with amusement as children attempt to kiss the floating apples with hands behind their backs, flopping forward dramatically. Some succeed, some sputter, and one boy emerges victorious, holding an apple slice triumphantly in his teeth like he's won a medal. The adults cheer lightly, mostly because cheering at children doing anything vaguely competent seems to be a universal genetic trait. You move on to a quieter game. A young man sets stones in a circle and asks participants to choose one and heat it gently in the edge of the fire. When the stones are warm, everyone holds them and makes a small wish. Nothing flashy, just simple hopes: a mild winter, healthy cows, mended fences, a roof that won't leak. You pick a smooth, round stone. Its warmth spreads into your hands, radiating up your arms, grounding you. Someone asks you what you're wishing for, and you answer honestly, a gentle night and good stories. The group hums approval. Seems like a perfectly valid wish here. You place your warm stone back in the circle. Traditionally, stones left in the fire overnight were checked the next morning. If your stone cracked, it was considered a bad omen. But tonight, no one seems worried. The energy is too soft, too calm. You can tell the villagers are simply following tradition because it brings comfort. Two elders begin a small argument, friendly, if slightly prickly, about whether stone circles in these rituals once symbolized ancestors or natural cycles. Historians still argue over similar questions, which makes this discussion feel wonderfully inevitable. The two men eventually agree to disagree, mostly because someone hands them warm cider and neither wants to debate with sticky hands. You sip your own cup. The cider is tangy sweet, warmed over the fire, infused with something herbal, maybe mint. It slides down your throat pleasantly, easing the stiffness in your shoulders. Around the circle, couples lean together, parents cradle sleepy toddlers, and the elderly sit closest to the fire where the heat can ease their bones. The entire gathering feels like a long exhale, a communal letting go of the year that's ending. One woman gently shakes a small rattle-like instrument made from dried gourds and seeds. Its soft shhk blends with the crackle of the fire. She sings a tune, slow, repeating, comforting. The melody is only a few notes, but they loop so soothingly that your thoughts blur in the best way. A man taps a drum softly, just a heartbeat rhythm. Boom, boom, boom. Steady, grounding. You feel your eyelids droop slightly. The fire glows reddish gold behind them. Children play a final game, one involving running in circles with their lanterns until the flames inside flicker like tiny storms. Adults watch with affectionate resignation. You sense that this game wasn't invented for Samhain specifically. It was likely invented by bored children in every century who think spinning until disoriented is peak entertainment. And honestly, it kind of is. One child spins a little too enthusiastically and tumbles into the grass. He pops up laughing, unharmed. The audience claps politely. His mother sighs heavily, proving once again that parenting transcends time. You wander to the edge of the gathering where a few villagers prepare offerings, small pieces of bread, nuts, dried berries, wool scraps. They placed them gently onto a flat stone. One man explains that these offerings honor family members who passed in recent years. He speaks softly, as if the night is listening. A mainstream historical detail surfaces. Samhain was often associated with honoring ancestors, a night when the veil between worlds felt thinner. But historians still argue whether offerings were placed outdoors for spirits or used symbolically indoors to represent memory and respect. Tonight, the villagers seem to practice a bit of both. An elder kneels to light a small candle beside the offerings. His lantern face glows around him, casting shadows that make his profile look ancient, carved from the same land he sits upon. You feel the significance ripple outward, not solemn, not heavy, just tender. He rises slowly, joints cracking, and pats your shoulder as he passes. Everyone comes from somewhere, he says vaguely, and somehow that hits deeper than expected. A woman invites you to join a slow procession circling the fire twice. The group moves like a quiet river, lanterns held steady, footsteps whispering across the ground. The fire's glow washes over your face as you pass, warming you momentarily before the night cools your skin again. After the second circle, the group breaks apart, settling again in little clusters. Someone hands you another cup of warm cider, which you accept because refusing hot drinks on cold nights is apparently illegal in every century. You notice the lanterns now arranged strategically, some marking paths, others placed at crossroads, others set on fence posts like sleepy guardians. They bob gently with the wind, their expressions flickering from mischievous to thoughtful to slightly confused. You love them all. A man with a thick wool cloak approaches with a small harp. He settles beside you and begins plucking a gentle tune, something old, slow, repetitive. You feel the notes in your bones, warm and soft, like someone brushing dust from your thoughts. You close your eyes for a moment, letting the sound and the fire and the night settle inside you. When you open them, a woman is watching you with a knowing smile. "It gets to all of us," she says. "These nights, they soften the edges." You nod because that's exactly what's happening. Your mind feels smoother. Your breath deeper. Your heart slower. She leans closer. "And if you like staying soft like this," she says in a whispery tone meant for the listener, "remember, liking this video, subscribing, and sharing a comment keeps these stories glowing warm. Like putting one more lantern on the path." You feel the warmth of that encouragement settle in the air, mixing seamlessly with the lantern light. The villagers laugh and share stories. Someone recounts a tale about a lantern so poorly carved it scared a horse into running backward. Another swears their brother once carved a turnip so round and perfect it rolled down a hill into the river, disappearing forever like a runaway wheel. The fire crackles. The music hums. The lanterns blink like ancient eyelids. And slowly, wordlessly, the community begins to prepare for the deeper night ahead. The kind of night where things get quiet, warm, and sleepy. You feel yourself drawn further into the heart of their world, into the soft glow of their shared rituals, into the comfort of being together in the cool dark. And the journey continues, wrapping around you like a wool blanket warmed by firelight. You slip into the next morning as though it's a warm bath, slowly, gently, without any sense of hurry. You wake not in your own bed but in a small loft tucked above one of the villagers' kitchens, wrapped in a wool blanket that smells faintly of wood smoke and old lavender. The ladder creaks as you climb down, and the soft clatter of someone working with a bowl greets you before your feet even hit the floor. The woman from last night, lantern-faced lady, as your sleepy brain now affectionately labels her, glances up from kneading dough. "You're just in time," she says, voice low and warm. In that morning I am not fully awake either way. She nods toward a rough wooden stool, and you settle onto it, rubbing your eyes as the room stretches itself awake around you. The kitchen is simple, clay cups on a shelf, a few bundles of herbs drying over the hearth, and a single turnip lantern, yours, sat on the windowsill. It's dim now, the tallow inside having long burned out, but the carved face still watches over the room like a grumpy guardian spirit. She sprinkles flour across the dough with practiced ease. "We'll need more lanterns for tonight," she says. "The processions grow larger every year." You nod, even though you don't yet know where this day is headed. But you're awake, you're curious, and there's nothing else to do but follow wherever the story nudges you. After a few bites of something that tastes suspiciously like porridge but with more personality, you step outside into the village square. The sun rises thin and pale, the kind that doesn't fully commit to warming anything but tries its best anyway. A few villagers move slowly across the yard, carrying baskets, tools, and uncarved turnips almost comically oversized. Apparently, today is carving day. Again. You join them on the path leading toward another field, one you haven't visited yet. This field is larger than the one you saw last night, stretching wide across the gentle slope of land as if embracing the entire village. Rows and rows of turnips lie ready for harvest, their purple tops poking out of the soil like sleepy creatures waiting to be woken. You pause at the edge, taking in the endless view of farmland. The dew sparkles. The breeze tastes like early morning. And somewhere inside you, the host in you clicks on, softly, gently, because we're still in ASMR bedtime mode here. You tell your viewer that this is the perfect moment to breathe in, breathe out, and sink deeper into the calm. And then, with that same warm hush, you remind them that if they haven't yet subscribed, liked, or commented, they can do it right now, only if they genuinely want more long, sleepy journeys like this. You encourage them to share their favorite part of the story so far, or the time and place they're listening from. You keep it emotional, soft, guiding. Like offering a cup of warm tea at dawn. And just like that, you step farther into the field. The villagers begin plucking turnips from the soil with a satisfying pop. You try one yourself, and it resists like it has something to prove. When it finally comes loose, you nearly fall backward, earning a soft chuckle from an older man near you. He points at your prize. "Sturdy one," he says. "Perfect for sculpting." You look down at the lumpy root in your hands. Calling it perfect feels generous, but you accept your destiny. As the group settles onto overturned crates and stones, someone brings out tools, knives, spoons, little scrapers worn smooth by generations of use. This isn't some arts and crafts situation with cheerful music and easy templates. This is root dissection. Muddy. Messy. Slightly chaotic. You sit with them, and soon enough the rhythm begins, knives carving, spoons scooping, the occasional frustrated grunt when someone accidentally creates a giant hole where an eyeball was meant to be. Amid the chatter, a mainstream historical fact emerges. In many rural Celtic communities, this annual carving day wasn't merely decorative. It marked the transition into the darker half of the year, when protection, guidance, and ritual mattered. These lanterns were sometimes placed in windows to ward off harmful spirits, sometimes set at crossroads to confuse wandering souls, and sometimes carried in processions like living embers connecting families and seasons. You let that fact settle in your mind as you scrape out turnip innards with a spoon that looks older than most countries. Nearby, two young boys argue, lightly, lazily, the way half-awake kids do, about which story behind turnip lanterns is the oldest. One swears the lanterns were originally used to impersonate spirits, tricking the real ones into leaving families alone on certain festival nights. The other insists the lanterns were friendly guides meant to help the ancestral spirits find their way home. Historians still argue whether these two explanations came from separate regional traditions or whether they were simply passed down differently through families. You catch snippets of story, belief, ritual, like overhearing different radio stations in the distance. Someone mentions an old tradition where families carve faces not to scare anything away, but to mimic ancestors, so the spirits would recognize the home. Another mentions a fringe but fascinating tidbit. In certain remote areas, people believed turnip lanterns could reveal fairy paths, those invisible routes spirits supposedly traveled, which humans should avoid stepping on. You can practically hear academics flipping between footnotes trying to validate that one. The older woman from last night, who seems to materialize wherever she is needed, settles beside you and takes a half-finished lantern from your hands. With swift, confident cuts, she shapes the mouth into something between a smirk and a grimace. "Faces must show personality," she says. "Otherwise the night won't remember them." You don't question her. She speaks with the tone of someone who survived at least 3 winters on wisdom alone. A soft breeze passes. Tools click. Turnips surrender to artistry. By midday, the group has created dozens of lanterns, each one unique. Some smiling. Some frowning. Some looking like they've been awake for 3 days straight, surviving only on root vegetables and despair. The villagers lay them out on blankets, forming long rows of faces. It's strangely beautiful. Almost ceremonial. You crouch to examine them, and for a moment, you swear some of them stare back at you with the energy of tired office workers ready for a lunch break. Lunch arrives. Thick bread, cheese, something herbal that tastes better than it looks. You eat with the rest, legs stretched out, sun warm on your face. A few children begin playing with the hollow turnip shells, wearing them like helmets. One collapses dramatically, pretending the lantern spirit took him. The adults don't even react. Probably happens every year. After eating, tasks are assigned with all the formality of a group project where everyone mostly knows what they're doing. You help carry the newly carved lanterns to a shaded clearing where they'll be prepared with wicks and tallow. Here, another layer of history folds into the day. A man with soot-darkened hands explains that tallow, the thick, slow-burning fat used in lanterns, was once a treasured material. Before wax was common, before paraffin existed, tallow kept almost every home lit. It burned long and steady, providing just enough light for work or prayer or storytelling. He shows you how to pour melted tallow into the hollow turnips, letting it settle at the base before inserting twisted cords that will become the wicks. You help him hold a few, hands warming slightly as the fat cools. He mentions casually that in some regions, lanterns were believed to trap negativity, absorbing lingering bad luck or sour spirits and burning them away. Historians still argue whether this belief was symbolic or literal, but the idea lingers pleasantly in your mind as you handle the lanterns. Someone jokes that if turnips really did trap negativity, modern people would be carrying entire sacks of them into meetings. You smile, imagining a corporate boardroom lit only by angry vegetable faces. The day stretches onward in that gentle, unhurried rhythm. Lanterns dry. Tools are cleaned. Children chase each other through the rows of harvested turnips. You sit beneath a tree, your back against its rough bark, watching the village breathe together like one long, ancient memory. As the shadows begin to lengthen, the villagers gather the finished lanterns and carry them toward the center of the village. The sun dips. The air cools. The world softens again. You join the slow movement of people preparing for another night, not a repeat of last night, but a continuation. A deepening. A slow layering of story, ritual, and community. Someone hands you your lantern from yesterday, now freshly relit. Its carved face glows warm and familiar, like a friend who stayed up waiting for you. The procession begins to take shape. Torches are lit. Faces glow. And the village, once again, leans into its own timeless heartbeat. You lift your lantern, feeling its warmth in your fingers. Another night is coming. Another layer of the story is ready to unfold. You move with the villagers as twilight settles in that slow, silky way it does when the world is in no hurry at all. The procession hasn't officially begun yet, but you can feel the anticipation settling over everyone, like dust motes glowing in the last scraps of sunlight. The sky is a soft bruise of lavender and silver, and each lantern is a tiny pulse of gold in the dimming light. You walk toward the edge of the village where a low stone wall marks the beginning of the older fields, places that hold stories like the earth holds roots. People gather in clusters, murmuring, adjusting cloaks, checking lantern wicks, arguing lightly about which path the procession will take. Children weave between legs like small, chaotic spirits, giggling as their lanterns bob with uneven enthusiasm. Your lantern feels warm in your hands, slightly heavier than you remember. Maybe it absorbed some of the day's stories. Maybe it's just the tallow. Either way, it glows steadily, comforting, almost companion-like. A man near you bends to adjust the wick in his lantern and mutters something about the old path needing lighting tonight, and a woman beside him snorts as if he's overreacting. They both speak with the confidence of people who have had this exact argument every year since forever. You stand there, listening, gently sinking into the serenity of the dusk. And just for a moment, in a soft hush, you speak to your viewer again. You tell them that if they're drifting deeper into the calm, if their shoulders feel a little looser and their eyelids a little heavier, they can tap like or subscribe, not out of pressure, but as part of this slow, crackling lantern-light moment. You ask them to comment where they're listening from, reassuring them that their voice becomes a small lantern in the comments section. Then you let the moment float away like smoke. Someone signals for everyone to gather. The procession is about to start. It begins with a soft hum, a low, almost subconscious sound rising from the crowd. Not a song. Not a chant. Just that quiet noise people make when they shift from waiting to participating. One of the elders lifts a staff with small metal rings attached to the top, and the rings chime together like faint bells shaken by a delicate breeze. You step forward with the others, following a narrow footpath cutting through tall grass. The lanterns form a flowing ribbon of light, swaying gently with every step. The scent of crushed plants fills the cool night air. Fireflies, actual fireflies, begin to appear at the edges of the field, blinking as if curious who dared steal their aesthetic. The path leads you toward a grove of ancient, twisted trees. Their branches arch overhead like wooden ribs, forming a natural tunnel. As you walk beneath them, the world feels different, quieter, slower, as if even the insects hold their breath out of respect for something older than memory. One of the villagers whispers near you, "This is where the old ones walked." He gestures at the trees, their trunks gnarled with age. These paths were lit by lanterns long before there were roads. A mainstream historical fact flickers to mind. Many rural communities used lantern processions to mark seasonal transitions, especially around times when the veil between living and ancestral memory was believed to thin. Lanterns weren't just practical, they were symbolic bridges between worlds. You imagine those ancient processions, long before pumpkins, before synthetic candles, before electricity, people carrying carved turnips through night fields to honor cycles of harvest, family, and spirit. But then the same villager adds a fringe tidbit. In some isolated regions, people believed that lantern flames could reveal invisible spirits traveling alongside them. Supposedly, if a lantern flickered in a certain way, it meant an unseen presence passing by. Historians still argue whether this belief was widespread or just pockets of local superstition. Tonight, though, with your lantern flickering faintly, the idea feels less silly and more fitting. The procession slows as the path narrows. Lantern light dances across tree bark, illuminating faces carved by time itself. Branches creak overhead in the gentle wind, sounding eerily like old voices clearing their throats before speaking. You step over exposed roots and fallen leaves, each footstep soft, muted. The ground feels ancient, packed tight by centuries of footsteps. The air grows cooler as the trees close around you. In the middle of the grove stands a stone marker, weathered, lichen-covered, almost consumed by nature. The villagers stop around it, forming a quiet circle. Your breath joins theirs in the cold air, each exhale a faint mist. The elder steps forward, raising his lantern. The glow spills across the stone, revealing faint lines carved into its surface, spirals, circles, shapes you almost recognize but can't fully puzzle out. You could stare for hours and still wonder what stories they hold. Scholars still argue whether stones like these were ritual objects, boundary markers, or simply ancestral memorials lost to translation. The elder speaks in a soft voice, low enough to blend with the night. "This stone remembers," he says, "even when we forget." His lantern flickers, and everyone seems to lean in just a fraction. He tells a story, not a dramatic tale, but a gentle one about ancestors who traveled through these fields carrying nothing but lanterns and hope for good harvests. How they left offerings of roots and grain at the stone to honor the land. How each family carved a lantern face to represent their lineage. How the stone, in return, was a silent witness to the generations who passed by. You imagine those families, walking these same steps, the night quiet except for their breath and the soft crackle of firelight. Maybe the lanterns were crude, just hollowed lumps of root. Maybe the faces were simple. But the symbolism, the intent, the togetherness, it must have felt familiar. The villagers begin placing their lanterns at the base of the stone. One by one, small lights gather like stars resting on the earth. You kneel and add yours to the cluster, the expression on its carved face illuminated with soft dignity. The stone glows gently with reflected light. As the lanterns settle, people fall into a comfortable stillness. There's no big speech, no dramatic ritual. Just breathing. Just quiet. Just the presence of communal remembrance. A girl whispers near you that her grandmother once told her the stone glows brighter when the spirits are pleased. Another boy counters that his grandfather claimed the stone glows whenever someone lies about doing their chores. You grin at that. Historians still argue whether these kinds of beliefs were ever formal tradition or simply creative ways to keep kids from misbehaving. After a long, warm moment, the procession resumes. Lanterns are lifted. People stretch stiff knees. Soft murmurs rise again. You follow as the group moves deeper into the grove, along a path so narrow it forces everyone into a quiet line. You walk behind a small boy carrying a lantern shaped like a lopsided dragon, Every few steps, he lifts it high to check for spirits. You pretend not to see him stumble over a branch for the third time. Not because you're being polite, but because you're too sleepy to judge. The path eventually opens into a wider clearing, a natural bowl in the landscape filled with tall grass that sways like soft waves. Here, villagers spread out, placing lanterns in circles and lines across the field. From above, it probably looks like constellations forming slowly on Earth. The glow warms the clearing with a soft golden haze, and you feel yourself exhale in a deeper way than before. You wander between the lanterns, admiring each one. The faces almost seem to shift in expression under the flickering flames, some sly, some somber, some downright goofy. You notice one lantern carved so poorly it looks like it's asking for help. You gently walk past it, because you do not have the emotional energy to take responsibility for a distressed vegetable tonight. A group of villagers sits in the center of the clearing, tuning small instruments, lutes, flutes, a drum softened by age. They begin playing a melody so simple it feels like a memory. The tune drifts through the air, weaving between lanterns like a ribbon. You settle into the grass beside them. The night deepens. The stars appear in quiet clusters overhead. One of the musicians tells you that this clearing has always been a gathering place, long before lantern traditions existed. People used to meet here to settle disputes, he says, because the open sky made tempers short and truth long. You've never heard that phrase before, but you like it. Truth long. You might steal that for future conversations. He shrugs and admits historians still argue whether this clearing was ever an official meeting spot or just a good place to avoid eavesdroppers. Either way, under the stars, anything feels possible. The music continues, low and steady. Someone hums along. Someone else falls asleep sitting up. A lantern flickers and dies with a tiny sigh. You sit quietly, letting the night press softly around you like a blanket. The lanterns glow. The villagers breathe in time. The air smells of earth and warmth and ancient stories blending into one another. You're not sure how long you stay there, but time doesn't feel important tonight. Only the lights. Only the calm. Only the slow, steady heartbeat of a tradition older than memory. Eventually, the elder stands, signaling that it's time to return to the village. Lanterns are gathered once more, carefully, reverently. You lift yours, feeling the warmth seep into your fingers. The walk back is slow. Peaceful. Half the children are asleep on their parents' shoulders. The moon hangs low and gentle. The lanterns form a flowing river of light through the dark fields. You follow that river, step by soft step, the rhythm lulling you deeper into the sleepy cadence of the night. By the time the cottages come into view, you feel wrapped in a calm so deep it hums behind your ribs. The village glows softly. The night feels timeless. And you, lantern in hand, feel part of something that stretches far beyond this single walk. You're not exactly sure when the village square transforms, but by the time the procession returns, the cottages no longer look like the cozy little homes you walked past earlier. Instead, they glow like warm lanterns themselves, light spilling through windows, shadows dancing inside, hearth smoke drifting upward in lazy spirals. It feels as if the whole village has leaned into this night, inhaled deeply, and settled into some ancient rhythm that pulses in the soft hush of footsteps on packed earth. You follow the villagers toward a wide open space between the cottages where long wooden tables have been arranged. Their surfaces are littered with baskets of bread, roots, old ceramic jars, and, of course, more turnip lanterns. Some lit. some waiting, some carved with expressions so bewildered they look like vegetables questioning their life choices. People move around you in unhurried swirls, placing lanterns along ledges, carrying chairs, adjusting shawls, greeting neighbors. It doesn't feel like preparation for a festival. Not really. It feels more like preparing for a long night, a night they've known intimately for generations, one that belongs to memory rather than spectacle. The elder who led the procession walks past you, nodding once in quiet acknowledgement. "Stay close," he murmurs. "There's much more to learn tonight." His voice doesn't sound dramatic, but in the way that old doors creak meaningfully or hearth logs crackle warmly, you sense he's hinting at another layer to the tradition, one you haven't yet been invited into. Your lantern flickers in your hands, casting soft orange light over your wrists. The carved face looks smug, like it knows a secret you don't. You whisper at it to behave. It ignores you, obviously. You join the villagers as they settle at the tables. You're handed a bowl of something warm and steamy, root stew again, but richer this time, with a swirl of herbs and a flavor that tastes like we cooked this for 14 hours while gossiping. As you eat, the conversations around you drift like slow-moving clouds. Someone mentions that lantern nights were once tied to harvest gratitude, marking the end of back-breaking labor and the beginning of winter rest. A woman adds that in her grandmother's time, people carried lanterns to the edges of their land to remind the spirits which fields belonged to which families. Historians still argue whether this practice was symbolic property marking or simply rural tradition woven from local belief. But tonight, hearing these people speak, it feels deeply meaningful. A boy at the far end of the table claims his lantern can predict the weather. When challenged, he insists, it flared up once during a storm. So obviously it works. A man nearby responds dryly, "It also flared up when you sat too close to the fire, but I suppose that makes you a meteorologist." You take another sip of stew to hide your smile. You overhear another group talking about a fringe tidbit. In certain distant villages, carved lanterns were believed to distract wandering spirits long enough for the living to pass safely between homes at night. They'd place the lanterns at crossroads, a woman says, because spirits get confused where paths split. Someone else jokes that modern people could use that trick for confusing scam callers. You inhale your stew at the wrong moment and nearly choke. The mood stays soft, warm, easy. Eventually, when bowls are scraped clean and lanterns burn steady, the elder stands again. Conversations drip into silence as he lifts his staff, not high, just enough to gather attention that's already leaning toward him. "We've honored the fields," he says. "We've honored the stone. And now we honor the stories that brought us here." He gestures for everyone to rise. You do, lantern in hand, following the group toward a narrow path between cottages. The air cools further as the night deepens, wrapping the village in a velvet stillness. The path leads you downhill, toward a small stream that glitters faintly like molten silver in the moonlight. A wooden footbridge crosses the stream. Lanterns hang from its rails, their reflections rippling in the water like sleepy stars. Beyond the bridge lies a meadow you haven't seen before, a wide sweep of grass glowing faintly under the moon. The villagers step onto it in small groups, spreading out across the soft ground. Someone nudges you gently. Pick a spot. Sit. Listen. The meadow is hushed except for the faint rush of water and the rustle of grass. You sit where the ground dips slightly, your lantern beside you. Its flame flickers in the cool breeze, casting shifting shapes on your boots. One by one, elders sit among the villagers, no special seats, no stage, just old voices blending into the meadow air. A woman begins a story in a voice so soft it might be mistaken for wind. She speaks of a time when people believed the spirits of ancestors visited on cold nights, guided by lanterns lit from the last ember of the harvest's final fire. They followed the light, she says, not because they were lost, but because they wanted to find us. She speaks of families leaving offerings, handfuls of grain, small tokens, carved roots, to greet the spirits and invite their blessing for the winter. Mainstream historical fact aligns here. In many Celtic regions, households practiced forms of ancestor veneration during transitional seasons, lighting lanterns or candles to honor those who came before. Hearing it woven into this village's tradition feels less academic and more living. The woman pauses. A small gust of wind pushes through the meadow. Lantern flames tremble. Another elder begins a different tale, this one stranger, more whimsical. He talks about the wandering ones, spirits neither malicious nor benevolent, who drifted across old paths searching for warmth. According to his grandfather, if a lantern burned steadily, it meant the spirits passed peacefully. But if a lantern guttered suddenly, it signaled mischief nearby. Historians still argue whether accounts of these wandering ones were metaphorical or interpreted literally, but it's clear the villagers embraced them as part of their folklore tapestry. You lean back on your hands, letting the night breathe around you. The meadow hums faintly with the sound of insects. The lanterns glow in scattered clusters like fallen constellations. A third elder, thin, sharp-eyed, wearing a knitted shawl that looks older than the moon, tells a story that straddles legend and lived memory. She speaks of a lantern that once burned for 3 nights straight without being refueled. Her mother insisted it was a sign from an ancestor watching over them. Her father insisted it was just good craftsmanship. Historians, she notes with a playful glint, still argue whether stories like hers point to symbolic meaning or embellished rural memory. As she speaks, a soft warmth settles in your chest. The combination of voices, lantern light, and the steady whisper of the stream creates a cradle of sound around the meadow. You feel yourself drifting, not toward sleep yet, but toward that peaceful space just before dreaming. Some villagers begin humming, a slow, circular tune that blends with the night. Others close their eyes. A few children fall asleep leaning against their parents, lanterns dimming beside them. You notice your own lantern flicker more strongly for a moment, as if reacting to the stories. You gently steady it with your hand. The elder beside you, the one with the staff, leans over slightly. "Do you know why we gather here?" he asks, voice barely above a whisper. You shake your head. "This meadow," he says, "is where our stories echo the clearest. The land remembers. The air remembers. We speak our past here so the future can carry it." It's such a simple thought, yet it settles deep, like a pebble dropped into a still pond. He continues, "When we light lanterns, we're not chasing away darkness. We're guiding it. Inviting it to sit beside us without swallowing us." A sleepy part of you thinks, that's actually very poetic. Might steal that one too. The lanterns around the meadow burn low. Flames lean, halos shrinking. Someone begins walking from lantern to lantern, gently trimming wicks, adding small bits of tallow, coaxing them to stay alive for a little longer. Children begin drifting toward the bridge, led by parents carrying bundles of blankets. The stream whispers softly. Night deepens into deeper night. And then, slowly, as if synced by instinct rather than instruction, the villagers begin rising. They gather lanterns, fold shawls, carry sleeping kids, and move toward the bridge. You join them, lantern warm in your hands once more. Crossing the bridge is like crossing into another realm. The lights reflect in the water, making it look like there are two processions, one above, one below, moving in perfect harmony. Back in the village square, people disperse into homes, but you and a small group follow the elder back up toward the hill where the lanterns first flickered last night. When you reach it, he stops, turning slowly to face the group. "One last task before rest," he murmurs. Everyone lifts their lanterns. The elder steps forward, plants his staff into the soil, and whispers something into the cool air, words you can't quite catch but feel nonetheless. A ripple of calm moves through the group. One by one, villagers place their lanterns along the top of the hill in a long, winding line. Each flame creates a small island of light in the darkness. Together, the lanterns form a glowing trail that stretches like a soft spine across the ridge. Your lantern finds its place among them, glowing with steady warmth. It looks proud. Honestly proud. As if it has fulfilled its vegetable destiny. The villagers stand in quiet reverence for a long moment. No speeches. No rituals. Just silence, breath, and the glow of carved turnip faces humming gently against the night. You stand with them, wrapped in the softest quiet you've known in a long time. And slowly, the lantern line becomes part of the landscape, guiding, watching, remembering. Dawn does not arrive so much as it unfolds, slowly, cautiously, like a shy guest peeking into a quiet room. The horizon blushes first, a pale ribbon of rose stretching thinly across the sky. The hills surrounding the village soften into silhouettes. And the lanterns you placed along the ridge, the proud little army of carved turnips, begin to dim under the growing light, their flames whispering smaller and smaller until they're barely more than warm embers breathing against the chill. You rub your eyes, not entirely sure when exhaustion crept into your bones. The festival never felt loud or demanding, but its quietness was its own kind of weight, gentle, meaningful, heavy in a comforting way, like a thick quilt laid across your shoulders. The elder standing near you watches the sunrise with a small, knowing smile. "This is the part most visitors never stay awake for," he murmurs. They see the lanterns lit. Few see them rest. You glance at the line of carved faces, now softening into morning. Some lanterns have collapsed inward as the heat finally overcame the thin walls carved the night before. Others remain stoic, their expressions unchanged, as if refusing to acknowledge time. A faint breeze sweeps across the ridge, carrying the smell of dew, smoke, damp soil, and something faintly sweet, perhaps the memory of last night's herbs lingering on the air. The villagers begin to gather again, emerging from shadowy paths like figures quietly woven back into existence. Some carry baskets. Others hold blankets. A few children stumble sleepily beside their parents, hair wild and eyes half closed. This is not the lively community that paraded under lantern light. This is the soft, hushed version of themselves, the morning after selves. You watch as the villagers begin to gently collect the lanterns one by one. There is no rush, no uniform procedure. Each person approaches the lantern they've chosen or carved, lifts it with care, and inspects it as though checking in on an old friend. Some lanterns are carried home to be composted. Others are placed in baskets to be given back to the fields later in the day. A few people choose to keep theirs, returning year after year with lanterns dried and hardened, becoming heirloom objects that smell faintly of tallow and tradition. The elder notices you standing still, hands empty. "Go on," he says, nodding toward your lantern. "It's yours to close." You step forward. Your lantern sits exactly where you left it, softly glowing, the smile you carved still intact. When you lift it, the warmth surprises you. Not hot. Just alive. Warm like a stone kissed by sunlight. For a moment, you're unsure what to do. The villagers around you seem to know their roles instinctively, as if born into the choreography of dawn. The elder watches you patiently, giving no instructions, waiting for you to find the thread yourself. You breathe in the cold morning, the fresh brightness rising behind the hills. And slowly, without fully understanding why, you cup the lantern in both hands and bow your head. A simple gesture. Not a ritual. Not a requirement. Just a quiet acknowledgement. The lantern's warmth seeps into your palms and settles there, like a final memory of last night's flame. The elder's voice drifts toward you, low and soft. When the lantern goes dark, he says, the light doesn't leave. It changes places. You're not entirely sure what that means, but the words sit in your chest like something true. He gestures for you to follow the others down the hill. As the villagers return to the square, the world gradually shifts into normalcy. Doors open. Hearth smoke rises. Children start chattering again. Someone's dog finally decides to bark after an entire night of respectful silence. But something has changed, not in the village, but in the air. The world feels steadier, quieter, more anchored. As if the lanterns, now extinguished, have woven some invisible thread through everything. You join the villagers in the square where a small fire has been rekindled. Not a ceremonial fire. Just a morning one, blue smoke curling lazily upward. A few villagers toss the remnants of melted tallow into it. Others lay thick slices of bread on wooden boards. Someone hands you a cup of something warm, spiced milk, sweetened lightly with honey. You sip it, letting the warmth return to your chest, pushing away the chill that settled in your bones during the night. The elder stands near the fire, leaning on his staff. He looks at you, really looks at you, with the kind of quiet appraisal that feels like a slow, patient nod of approval. You carried the lantern well, he says. You laugh softly. I almost dropped it 3 times. He shrugs. Lanterns prefer honesty over perfection. You're still holding your lantern. The carved face, now unlit, looks different in daylight, less mystical, more endearing. Like a tired friend who stayed up too late. The elder notices. You can keep it, he says. Or return it to the soil. Both choices honor it. You glance down at the lantern. You think of its flickering flame, its stubborn little spirit, the stories told in the meadow, the warmth shared in bowls of stew, the faces glowing under lantern light, the calm weaving through the night. You realize the lantern isn't just a vegetable with a candle stuck inside. It has become a companion. And for reasons that feel gentle and correct, you choose to keep it, at least for now. The elder nods once more, satisfied. Then you carry a small piece of our night with you, he says. Guard it well. Such nights become rarer the older we grow. A quiet settles between you, not awkward, but comfortable. The kind of quiet shared by people who have witnessed something meaningful together. The sunlight brightens. The village warms. And with the morning fully awake, the lantern night slips gracefully into memory. Not ended. Just transformed. The villagers move into their day. The elder walks toward his cottage. And you, lantern tucked under your arm, heart still humming with last night's gentle magic, realize something softly profound. The tradition never needed the lanterns. It needed the people. And now, for this night and this morning, you are one of them. The world around you now breathes slower, softer. The village hums faintly in the morning light, but you feel detached, suspended in a quiet bubble that stretches just beyond the bustle of the waking day. The warmth of the lantern still lingers in your hands, and the memory of the fire, the soft melodies, the laughter of children, drifts gently through your mind like a feather on a calm stream. You close your eyes and let it all sink in, letting the steady pulse of the night's stories seep into your bones. Breathe in. Breathe out. Feel the gentle weight of the wool blankets, the faint scent of tallow and herbs, the cool touch of dew that has collected overnight on the grass. Let it remind you of continuity, the way these people, these lanterns, these hills, have endured and transformed through generations. The carved faces, now quiet in the sun, are not gone. They live in memory, in your mind, in the way the light warms your chest. Allow yourself to float with the calm of shared ritual. Let the soft cadence of the past guide your thoughts like a river winding through familiar landscapes. Remember the gentle humor of misfit turnips, the whispered debates of elders, the careless giggles of children carrying their lanterns as if they held the whole night's magic in their hands. And now, as your heartbeat slows, feel the pull of sleep, a natural, welcoming descent. The village, the lanterns, the meadow, and the stone are all there in your imagination, keeping watch, keeping calm, guiding you deeper into stillness. The stories you've walked through tonight are yours now. Hold them gently, like the flicker of a lantern. Let them soften your thoughts, ease your mind, and carry you into a quiet, restorative rest. Sleep comes easily here. Soft, gentle, safe. And as it does, know that the glow of the past, of communities, rituals, and tender human moments, shines quietly, eternally, within you.